page, and I'm an alcoholic, and I just want to give the heads up, Rob's here. So if we could co-host him so we can put things in the chat, that'd be great, but no rush, no stress. Anywho, where we're picking up today is on page 60, just as Neil said, right after the 3 pertinent ideas. We can find them because they're listed A, B, C. Awesome. All right, so now, where we're picking up, page 60, it says, being convinced. We were at step 3. So the 3 pertinent ideas are these ideas that we need to understand, accept, and really acknowledge before we're able to make that 3rd step decision. And the 3 pertinent ideas, as we spoke about last week, are diving into a step 1 idea, a step 1 idea, and a step 2 idea. I'm diving into the idea that I am an alcoholic and my life is unmanageable, and that I am beyond human aid. But there is a power that is available to me if I'm willing to seek that power. So as we get into being convinced, it makes sense that if I am convinced, oh no, I'm going to drink again, and I can't drink. Like, it ruins my life. If I'm convinced of that, and I'm convinced that there could be a power that exists that could relieve me of this illness, this obsession to go back to it, it makes sense that I would then decide, alrighty, I'm going to go after that. You know what I mean? So that's ultimately what we're talking about. Page 60, well, I don't even know what paragraph, being convinced, 2nd from the bottom. We'll find it when we find it. Alrighty, so it says, being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that, and what do we do? And what's helpful is as we go through, we're going to explain what we mean by that, what we do. We're going to really break it down. But it's me, so I'm going to break it down right here as well. I know, I'm as shocked as you are. Paige, talking too much on a single paragraph? Who would have thought? But when it says that we decided, so what I want to do is emphasize that word decided. The 3rd step, and I'm going to say, is simply a decision. I won't say just a decision, because I don't know if you're aware, it's a pretty big one. You know, if you've ever, when you're new, and sometimes old timers will say like, hey, don't make any big decisions in your first year. It's like, have you seen the 3rd step? That's a big one, you know? And so it is simply a decision. I won't say just. But I want to point something out. So this is a metaphor. This is not literal, but this is a metaphor. If the first step is a concession, that if I stay in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, that's where I live, if I stay where I'm at, I will drink again. That's what the first step is. A metaphor, the geographic is not the solution. But the 2nd step is ultimately believing that London, England is a place. And it would be a little rude for me to show up at ODAAT and be like, I know you think London works for you, but I just don't believe it exists. Okay, living in Southall, all right. You know, Hounslow, the council estates, I'm trying to Costa, Nando's. I'm trying to label or list off all my London things. And you can tell I'm not doing the big touristy runs like Paddington Station, you know, a little bear that goes on adventures with marmalade. Okay, London, it's not real. But here's the thing. All I need to believe is that some of you live in London. That's all I need to believe. I don't need to, have an opinion on the double-decker buses. I don't need to know all the places the Lizzie line goes. I don't need to understand the ins and out of the city or its history or any of that. I just need to believe that you live there. Now, in the 3rd step, ultimately what I'm going to do, knowing that if I stay where I'm living, I'm going to drink again, and knowing that there is a solution that is London, England, the 3rd step is a decision to go there. And you know what? That's it. I've decided I'm coming to London. Off we go. Get a bag packed. I'm on my way. And you'll notice I'm still here in Calgary, Alberta. Nothing has changed. So a decision that is not followed up by action will not get me to London, England. What do I need to do? I do know that I need like a travel permit, which I think mine's still good. So I think I can, but I got to get that. I got to make sure I have my passport. I got to get a ticket. I've got to get to the airport. And here's what it'll probably be. I have to go through security. I have to find my gate. I have to get on that plane. And I'm just going to assume I'm not getting a direct flight. I got to stop off in Toronto, say hi to Rob, and get on a different plane across the Atlantic. And only when I land in Heathrow or Gatwick, but probably Heathrow, only when I land in Heathrow am I actually in London. And so that's what it's like with the 12 steps. Step 1 is the realization and the concession that if I stay where I'm at, I'm going to drink again. Step 2 is the belief that a spiritual awakening exists. And the third step is a decision to take the course of action that will get me to the spiritual awakening. And the 12 steps are what get me from Calgary to London. The 12 steps are what get me from a place of hopelessness to the place of spiritual awakening. So ultimately, what the third step is simply a decision to work these 12 steps out of this book as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. You saw my little bookmark did a loop-de-loop. It did a little flip there. Sorry for those that were taking notes and missed it. I don't have a stunt double, so I don't think I'm going to be able to do that again. I was like, whoa. But that's what the third step is. I'm deciding I'm going to do these 12 steps. I'm going to give them my best effort as a way of life. And then, so that is the whole thing that I'm going to say about the word decided. So I haven't even finished breaking down this sentence, so please bear with me. It says, decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. So what is our will and what is our life? Now, in a lot of meetings, and I want to be clear, this isn't wrong, but in a lot of meetings, I hear that our will is our thoughts and our lives are our actions. And I don't think that's wrong. And if that you resonate with that, amazing. I'm not being critical. But a sponsee of mine, and it's always the coolest when the sponsees are like, oh, they're sprinkling in some cool stuff. It's the best. But a sponsee of mine looked at it through the lens of, what if my will is my actions and my life is the results? And that was something that really resonated with me. I know that you guys have great thoughts all the time. Listen, I'll be honest. I have meditated like over an hour today, and still I will get thoughts that are like anxiety, just like, whoa, what about my, just it'll get going. And I don't necessarily have control over the thoughts that come into my little brain, dancing like sugar plums or whatever, I don't always have control over the thoughts that happen. But what do I have the ability to control is the actions I take. And what happens is I leave, no worries, we're just glad you came for as much as you could. What I have control over is my actions. But what's interesting is the results are not really in my hands. But is not my life the result of the series of actions that I take, whether they be good or not so great, whether they be diving in or not diving in? And so what I also want to point out is that my experiences, my will and my life does not get turned over to God's care in step 3. My will and my life gets turned over to God's care in steps 4 through 9. And continues to be in God's care as I continue in 10, 11, and 12. So that's helpful, because sometimes it's like, I've made a decision, I'm not in London, I got to take some action to get there. And sometimes I can be really hard on myself. And I know that I'm going on another tangent. We've made it like not even through the first full paragraph, but that's to be expected here. You guys are not surprised. But I remember when I was it was just after a year of sobriety, I broke up with my ex. And, that like the codependent hostage situation that, oh gosh, no worries. That codependent hostage situation, that I disguised as a loving relationship only to myself. Nobody else thought that was what that was. They're like, it's a dumpster fire, girl. But I had broken up. And to my recollection, I'm sure I was oversharing about that at meetings. I'm sure that's the thing that I was doing, just my emotional blah, and I have no doubt that many an old timer were probably like, Paige, you gotta turn it over. And I, being a very conflict averse human being, was like, yes. Oh, yes, that's so wise. That's so smart, old timer. You know what's up. Absolutely. And then I go home and be like, what the heck does that mean? What does that mean? How do I do that? Because I sometimes need literal instructions. So if you're wondering, how do I turn my will and my life over to the care of God? Or I'm struggling with something. How do I turn it over? What is the next direction that follows the third step but inventory? Inventory is often the next course of action that allows me to take it, really to rend it out of my hands and into the hands of a loving higher power, that 4 through 9 process. But if I'm struggling to turn it over, what I've found is inventory is often the next course of action to take. And we can take that course of action as we move into the 4th step, but it is also the course of action that we find in the 10th step when I notice that I've got a resentment and I call somebody and I take it through the columns after I've prayed for it to be removed. Got the order a little wrong, but we got there. It's early. Some of you are going to be like, it's almost 2 p.m. for you. It's not that early, Paige. Alrighty. So it says, to God as we understood him. Now, one of the things that I'm going to point out is in step 3, as it's written on page 59, it says, over to the care of God as we understood him. Now, in the 3rd step, I'm at the precipice. I'm at the edge of a cliff. And we spoke about this probably last week, if not the week before. We go at the pace we go. But that I'm at this edge of the cliff and I'm standing there and what is, I look over the edge and what I see is this cloud of unknowing. I can't see what the result is going to be. And let's be real, it is a leap of faith. I don't know if my will in my life is going to be cared for. But what happens is every time in this book I see a promise, that is evidence of God's care. But more powerful than that, every time I experience a promise as it is outlined in this book, that becomes irrefutable evidence of God's care in my life. And so this is a book of mirrors, and it's not just a book of mirrors as we go through and as we're going to go and see here in a minute. And it's not just a book of mirrors as I go through the 1st step. It is a book of mirrors where I can hold up the promises to the experience of my life. If I followed the directions as they're outlined in this book, did I get the results? It is a book of mirrors, and when those results begin to come true in my life, it is evidence that my will in my life has been cared for. And we got promises all over this thing. So don't just think I'm talking about those 9th step ones, which are rad. I'm not saying they're not rad, but we got promises all over, an abundance, a plethora, if you will. So it says, just what do we mean? As we understood him. So as we understood. This is a shocker to no one. I'm a real hoot. And as a result, I got a 1930s dictionary. I already had it. I'm just so fun at parties. Let me read you the encyclopedia. Just having fun time on my own with my dictionary. But what I did was I looked up the word understood in my 1930s dictionary. And this is important, or at least it's really helpful, because when we're approaching the 3rd step, I feel almost overwhelmed because I don't understand this power. And, the 2nd step in many ways felt frustrating because I was overthinking it, because I thought I was supposed to put together a conception, an idea, and it felt inadequate. And the book met me there and took me where I needed to go. But the word understood in my 1930s dictionary, it says to know through experience. And at the 3rd step, I'm not going to have that experiential knowing of this power, but I will build that experiential knowing of this power through the course of the 12 steps. through this way of life, through these actions. That is the point. So if you're here today and you're at the precipice of the third step, how convenient. What a good time to be coming, you know? That might be a God shot. I'm just trying to welcome. All right. But if you're standing at that precipice, you don't need to know. You will as you take this course of action. That will become the God, the power that you begin to understand. So just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? Which I will point out is rude. It's got a little do in there. And that means I have to take actions? Not cool. You're asking so much of me. Oh, it's almost like I certainly hope there's not a whole chapter that comes next that's called like into action or something, where it tells me to take action. Where's the rest on my laurels chapter? You know, all right, I'll focus. So it says the first requirement. So this, for me to make the decision that I'm going to live this new way of life, that I'm going to live these 12 steps as a way of life, the requirement for me to do that, for me to be willing to make that decision, is that I be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Any life run on self-will. And for a long time, I read that as, you know, an alcoholic life, a non-alcoholic life, and yes, self-will, stubborn, willful adherence to their own desires or ideas. And even though that's not in Rob's delightful definition, I'm going to go whim on my whims, you know, because listen, I act on whims. Nowadays, more on whimsy than whims, but neither here nor there. Focus pitch. So I need to be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And I read that for a long time as any life, an alcoholic life, a non-alcoholic life, it does not work. But my friend Bill S., and he always wants credit, so I always make sure I give it to him. He doesn't always want credit, but he's like, make sure you give me credit. And I'm true to my word, and I will. So Bill S., he pointed this out, and it just blew it wide open for me. That any life doesn't just mean my life versus a non-alcoholic life. It means the various lives that I live and that I have. What do I mean by that? I don't, but many of us have a work life, maybe a school life, a family life, a thought life, what's happened in between those years, a sex life, a health and wellness, or health life, a wellness life. You know, we have these different areas of our life. And so often there's that desire to compartmentalize things. For, you know, this to be my little AA basket and to put some eggs in there and to get other little baskets. And, oh, that feels like spring. I'm talking about the Easter Bunny. Listen, I'm in Canada. We're a long way away from spring. But I want to just have everything separate. But what I need to be convinced is me trying to manage, trying to fix, trying to control my life and the outcomes of my efforts does not work in any area. Can I be convinced that it doesn't work at work? Can I be convinced that it doesn't work at home? Can I be convinced it doesn't work with any area of my life, with my thinking, with my fears, my anxieties, and my hopes and my dreams? Can I be convinced that it's not working? And what that means is when I flip that these 12 steps are what I bring into every area of my life. And I mean, it tells me that in the 12th step that we practice these principles. For me, the principles are the tangible actions of the 12 steps, that we practice them in all our affairs. I practice them in every area of my life. But it's always helpful to have a reminder. So it's not my little AA, but it's I was gonna say basket. I'm like, what do I keep in buckets? Oh yeah, andas and yeah buts, and I think I had like something else in buckets. Anywho, so can I be convinced of that? And it goes on to say, on that basis, me trying to run my life, me trying to control things, me trying to control the outcome, on that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody. Collision, like a car accident, like it's just not working. I'm banging up against other people. I'm banging up against life. It's just not working. And this is what is incredible. It says, even though our motives are good, I'm showing up with the best motives. I think I'm this dabster that is dabster of my life, the dabster of your life, the dabster of how everyone is supposed to be a skilled expert in everything. And I'm showing up with the best motives, and still I'm in collision. And an interesting thing that I want to talk about motives is a lot of times I'll get focused on motives. And a lot of times it's that idea that like, oh, you got to do it for the right reasons. And I don't think anyone came to AA for the right reasons. I mean, most of us, like, I'm not saying you guys didn't. I'll just speak about me. You guys absolutely came to AA for the best reasons. It certainly wasn't for the coffee. But you know what I mean? I can get well off bad motives if I take action. I have bad motives to write inventory. Let's say that bad motive is so my sponsor likes me. Great. You know what I'll then get free of? That needing for approval if I take the inventory. I can make amends with poor motives. You know what happens? Freedom. And it's that idea that like my motives don't matter as much as I think they do, because even with good motives, even with the best motives, and I care a whole lot about people. I genuinely do. Maybe a little bit too much, but I genuinely care about people, and I want to help, and I would show up with the best motives, and it wouldn't work. They would get hurt. I would get hurt. The situation would blow up. And I was like, why is this happening? It goes on to say, most people try to live by self-propulsion. So propulsion is like movement. So self-will. Most human beings try to live by self-will. We're picking ourselves up by our bootstraps, which is physically not a possible thing to do. So I'm going to push myself through life. I'm going to move myself through life. I'm going to do it. And then it goes on to say, each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. And so what we're getting into is this beautiful metaphor. So let's say that we're all in a play together. And let's say, for those that didn't like skip out on high school, I remember this was like grade 10. Grade 10, we had to do Romeo and Juliet. So let's say the play is Romeo and Juliet. And some of you are going to be like, girl, that play is not a romance. That play does not end well. It's not good. I know, I'm here for the drama. And so what's the reality? The reality is I'm tree number 3. So I am tree number 3, and I have been given my script. And what does my script say? It says, sway in the breeze. I don't have any lines. And I'm not the director, so I don't know the lighting cues, the sound. Listen, I think, you know what Romeo and Juliet really needs? Some alternative polka. I think that'll get Romeo and Juliet real bumping. You know, that's what we need. And I don't know the set design. I don't know the costuming. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. I don't know your lines. But I think I do, and I'm trying to run the whole show. So I like to imagine that I'm a little like tree number 3, and I'm scooting to the front, like, listen, I'm Juliet. You know, if you're wondering why am I scooting, because I'm in a little tree truck costume. You know, another way to look at it is that I'm a little house sparrow, but I think I'm a blue-footed booby. You know, doing my little mating dance. I'm like, look at me. But I'm just a little house sparrow, and y'all are like, girl, you're getting your ornithology wrong, you know? And so that's what's happening is I'm trying to control everything. I'm trying to manage everything. I'm trying to manage the outcome of this play, but you're going to notice I'm tree number 3. You know what I am not? I am not the director. I don't have the full script, and you all have lines and roles in your play, and I'm telling you, hey, this is what you need to do, and you're like, girl, that's not what it says on my script, you know? So it says, if his arrangements would only stay put. Who keeps turning off the alternative polka? You know, who keeps doing that? You know, Brian, you're supposed to be doing some pirouettes. What's going on here? Pirouette more. You know what I mean? You know, and the Montagues and the Capulets. That's like kind of all what I have of Romeo and Juliet left in my memory. But I'm trying to get them to do that. And you're like, hey, we're not supposed to mingle the way you think we're supposed to. There's a play. We're supposed to follow these lines. And I'm like, man, if only my arrangements would stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Can you not see my vision for how this is supposed to go? It's like, girl, who put you in charge? Who said you could tell me what to do? And I love this because it says everybody, including himself, would be pleased. And I love that line because it's really like everybody would be happy if everyone just did as I thought they should. And a weird byproduct of that was that I will also be happy, but that's not the main focus. That's just a byproduct. You'll all be happy. And then, I guess maybe I'll be a little okay if y'all do what I want. And here's the thing. No, you even wouldn't, or no, I wouldn't, even if you did, because it still wouldn't be perfect, right? But I think life would be wonderful. I'm trying to do It's a Wonderful Life in the middle of, in the middle of Romeo and Juliet, and it's like, girl, we got to follow the plot line. What are you doing? And it says, in trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. I am just showing up as my best self. You can almost see the halo that's emanating. I actually could move that leg. Woo, that halo. You can almost see it. I'm showing up as my best self. So he may be kind, considerate, patient, even modest and self-sacrificing. And it's not working. And then it goes on to say, on the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. So I'm not showing up as my best self. I'm showing up kind of like a mean person, a cruel person, an unkind person, a demanding person, a manipulative person. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. And a really helpful thing is if you're not familiar with this part of the book, if you read it on your own or you read it with people, you can read it by putting in your own name. So, for example, when it says, Paige is like an actor who wants to run the whole show. Paige is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in her own way. If only Paige's arrangements would stay put. If only people would do as she wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including Paige, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, Paige may sometimes be quite virtuous. She may be kind, considerate, patient, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, Paige may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, Paige is more likely to have varied traits. I don't need you to tell me which traits you see more of. We don't need to put that in the chat. But as we read through the bottom of 60, 61, even getting into 62, it can be helpful to read the book in that way, putting myself in the book to really see, is this me? Is this my experience? It goes on to say, what usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. So I start to begin to fall into that self-pity, that poor me, that no one's listening to me. That self-pity that is that warm blanket I want to wrap myself in until it turns into a noose. And it says, he begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. So I feel like I'm being treated unfairly as a result of me trying to control everything. And I'm like, you know what the solution is? More of me. More of me trying to control and fix and manage. Let's get some more me on the scene. And so I'm going to be like director extraordinaire telling everyone what to do. I have no electrical experience, but let me tell you how those lights should go. I'll use electrical tape. It'll be fine. You know what I mean? I'll just show up and control. And you guys are like, hey, you don't know this thing. It goes on to say he becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. And I can't tell you how many times that or gracious has kicked me in the butt. Like, when you think you're just being kind and considerate, and it's like, oh, no, I had an expectation of a certain sort of outcome. And I thought if I was just a little bit nicer, a little bit more gracious, a little bit more understanding, I could get what I wanted. Oh man, it's rude of the book to perpetually call me out like this. So on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious as the case may be. So what is the result of even more self, even more control, even more sitting in the delusion of the God chair? It says, still the play does not suit him. It doesn't work. The result is it doesn't work. Hold that up to my life. Has it worked? It goes on to say, admitting he may be somewhat at fault. So I have just a glimmer of self-awareness. Okay, you know what? I might be a bit at fault, but he is sure that other people are more to blame. So I get a glimmer of, you know what? I could be the problem here. But if you didn't do all of this and all of that, then I would be okay. That glimmer didn't last very long. And it says, he becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. And so when we talk, Rob is crushing it with the definitions. I just want to point that out. He is all over it. But when we talk about that anger, and of course that makes sense, we can tap into that feeling of anger. Now that indignation is a lot more that self-righteous anger, which, that is not good for people like me. It is a luxury I cannot afford. When I am right and I think I'm right, and I don't even think I'm right, I know I'm right, and they did wrong, and let me tell you, I'm in trouble. And that's self-pity. Again, that's that warm blanket for me that turns into a noose, like a quicksand that pulls me under. And it says, what is his basic trouble? So what's going on underneath the surface here? It says, is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Now, I'm not going to ask anyone to do a show of hands because I'm going to do a little judo flip. So nobody has to cop to this. Brian's like, I'm on it. But you know how many of us identify as people pleasers? And that was something that I identified with for a long time. I'm not going to make anyone do a show of hands. I thought I was a people pleaser. But you see, the thing with a people pleaser is they care if the people are pleased. Let me be honest with you. I don't care if they're pleased. I care if they like me. That's what I'm after. I'm not after them being pleased. I'm after their approval. So I am not really a people pleaser. I am an approval and a word that starts with W that I will not relate in good company. And if you're like, Paige, watch your profanity. Don't you worry. Another way to say it is a self-seeker even when trying to be kind. Because my kindness is trying to get your love, your attention, your value, my own sense of value from you, approval. Like that's what I'm after. Love, attention, affection, and approval. I have this prayer on my, thing right here, where it says, dissolve my need for love, attention, affection, and approval so that I can be who you need me to be. Because I will chase that in others because I don't have a sense of that in myself. And it doesn't work. So it goes on to say, is he not a victim of the delusion? And I want to point out that word delusion, because where have we seen that word delusion before? Well, in reference to the obsession of the mind. Now, this time it's not being used in reference to the obsession of the mind. But what do we know? The most insane thing that any of us could do is take that first drink, especially with all the evidence that we have that we cannot drink like other people, that it ruins our lives. We have years, sometimes even decades of experience that we can't do it. And the thought that this time will be different. And so what I want to point out is that this delusion is as insane as the first drink. So the delusion, and it's to be a victim of the delusion. And anytime we see delusion, we really are a victim of it. I think I'm making a good idea. I think I've got it figured out, but I am a victim of that false belief. So is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? I just gotta manage. And it's sort of intuitive that that's not where happiness comes from. Rest is the root of the word wrestle. That's right, an etymology tangent. Woo! And so rest means to take by force. And it sort of is intuitive. And maybe it's not intuitive. But that satisfaction and happiness cannot come from trying to wrestle and wrangle and take by force out of my management of others. And so what do I need to do? Well, I have this sponsee who loves a lazy river. A lazy river is when you're sitting in an inner tube and you're just gently trying to flow down the stream. See, what I'm trying to do when I'm trying to wrest satisfaction out of my managing well, it's like I'm trying to turn the tide of a river and I'm trying to push that river upstream. And I'm not a beaver. I don't got that power. I can't do it. And I'm pushing against something that is impossible. And so what do I need to do? I need to drop the W. And I need to rest with an R. Rest in satisfaction and happiness. And if you're here and you're like, how do I do that? How do I drop the R? How do I drop the W so I can rest with an R? How do I do that? That is what steps 4 through 9 help me to do. And I continue that process in 10 and in 11 and 12. That's what we're doing. So that's how I drop the W. That's how I get to rest in this lazy river, that we get to, we're not fighting it. We're not, trying to swim upstream. We get to literally go with the flow, which for some of us is not a natural course of action. I'm like, no, but where's the flow going? I need to control it. I want to turn into the U.S. Army of Engineers and build a dam and do all these things. And, my hydrophonic this or hydroponic that. I don't know the words for it, but you know what I mean? I'm like, we're at the flow. I got to figure it out. And so it goes on to say, and is it not evident? And this is what it sounds like. And is it not evident to the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? Can you not see that I need you to, I need that Juliet to get off screen and I need to, shimmy my way and I need my alt polka. And don't you see that these are the things that I want? Is it not evident? And I love that because that tone is like, yeah, what you want doesn't matter, Paige. And I have a dear friend in Sacramento who makes these buttons, and on them it says, what I want doesn't matter, which is just great because it's so true. What I want doesn't matter. You are all trying to live your life, and I can find much deeper happiness if I'm not trying to control you. And this is how we are perceived by others, where it says, and do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all that they can get out of the show. So do not my actions make other people do things and bump into me and step on my toes. And you see, all I see is you're bumping and not doing what I want. I don't see that I caused that terrible cycle to begin in motion in the first place. I can't see that I hurt them first. I only see that the world isn't treating me right. And it goes on to say, is he not even in his best moments a producer of confusion rather than harmony? In my best moments, do I not create chaos? Do I not create confusion? Is the play Romeo and Juliet not working at the hybrid with throwing in It's a Wonderful Life? You know what I mean? It's not working. And can I not be convinced that this is not working and that me trying to control it doesn't work? So what is the third step? So the third step is ultimately about being and believing. So if you've ever been on stage before, even on a school holiday pageant, when you have the lights that are on you, what that means is you can't quite see out into the audience. It's dark. And so there's an element of trust. But what we're going to do is we're going to trust that right in the middle of the audience, in that perfect spot, is sitting the capital D director. Yeah, it's not me. I was sitting in the delusion of the director's chair, and people were like, girl, what are you doing? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to trust that there is a capital D director who has the full script, who knows the lighting cues, who knows the sets, who knows, what the tape on the floor is supposed to mean, who knows all of it, and knows that alternative polka probably isn't the best choice for Romeo and Juliet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the director be the director. And I want to point something out. The director was always there and always working. You know what I'm saying? It's not like there wasn't a director. I'm just showing up and telling people what to do. So I'm going to let the director that's always been there and has always been directing, I'm going to let the director be the director. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow my script and I'm going to say my lines. And in the very literal sense, okay, what are my lines? Well, the very next line that I have is step 4. So I'm going to write inventory. And my lines in their totality is 4 through 9 and 10, 11, 12. My lines are these 12 steps as a way of life. But to go back to our tree number 3 metaphor is what are my lines? If you remembered, it was sway in the breeze, which I think is a beautiful metaphor. Because in the second step, how often does it talk about, I can't believe in God, I can't see God, just like I cannot see the wind, but I see the effects of the wind. So what is my line? My line is to let God's power flow through me, to be moved by this power, to be an expression of this power's love. How do I get there? How do I do that? 4 through 9 and keeping it going in 10, 11, 12. That's how we do that. And so that's what I'm going to do. I am going to decide that I am no longer the director. I never was. And I am going to be tree number 3. I always was. And there's nothing better that I could do than be tree number 3. I mean, I sometimes, when I get a little bit of free time, I make little designs, and I have this little design that I made that's called Happy to Be Tree Number 3, but I wasn't able to find it on my computer before the meeting started. So unless Rob's got a copy, no pressure if he doesn't, I don't got it for you. But so it goes on, and we got some more metaphors. It says our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. What does it mean to be self-centered? You see, I thought, and God, he is just crushing it. Rob is on it. He's got it. I thought self-centered meant, and I always come back to that episode of The Simpsons where Bart we found out that Marge was pregnant with Lisa, and he was having that like only child syndrome, and he grabs the pots and pans and he starts clamoring, I am so great. Everybody loves me. I am so great. I thought that's what self-centered was, and I could assure you that was not me. But self-centered simply means to be centered or focused on myself. And I assure you I was self-centered because I was absolutely convinced I was the worst person that ever lived. I was bad and wrong, and everybody hated me, and I suck. And that is me centered upon me. And egocentric, again, me focusing on my ego. And that ego that we talk about is that oftentimes it's that little self that mushed up in my pain and my need to be right and my selfishness, my self-centeredness, my fear, my delusion, self-seeking. That I'm just focused on me. And it goes on to say, he is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. Now, it is February in Canada, where I live, and the weather, and I apologize to the Fahrenheit people. I think it's like minus 10 Fahrenheit, but it's like minus 26 degrees Celsius, and we got 18 centimeters of snow. And we ain't done. Like spring is nowhere in sight. You know what I mean? That's what we're living with. Now, if you get me down to Florida, you know what I mean? Oh, that's the place to be. And I just imagine this retired businessman. So no emails, no work reports, no nothing to do. And imagine coming from weather like this, because that's going to help the visual, lolling in the Florida sunshine. So imagine some white sand, like perfect white sandy beaches, the palm trees swaying in the breeze, and the ocean lapping at the shore, beautiful crystal clear water. And he's not there. He's not there. He's in his head thinking about how everything's wrong and needs to be different about the world. That's where he is. And is that not what happens to me? I miss the reality and the beauty of this moment, even with the temperature and snow, because I'm busy in my head thinking about how I think things need to be different. And then it says, the minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Now that word sin, if that carries a negative connotation for you, totally, I can understand. The word sin is also an archery term, and it simply means to miss the mark, or to use AA language, defects of character. So here's what it's saying. Instead of the minister who sighs over the sins of the 21st century, let's have a look at the alcoholic who is sitting in the meeting and judging everybody's defects of character. Because what is it doing? I'm complaining about how everybody's, their defects. And what's the reality? I can't do anything about my own defects. And then it says politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. And you know how it's kind of been a little divided and a little fighty and a little conflicty. Doesn't it make sense that if one group completely and totally got their way, half the other people would be deeply upset? We can see. And if you're not sure about that, go make a motion about the coffee cups at your home group. Go see what happens. Utopia is a hard thing to find. And so, and if the rest of the world behaved, done what I think it needs to do. And then it says, the outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. Now, about that outlaw safecracker, I am not an expert on the judicial system, but I do have a sense that if I am not breaking into safes, I don't get arrested for that crime, typically. And, just throwing that out there. But also, what I want to point out, now, I know you guys have no idea what this is like, to lock yourself out of the house, and especially if you did that a whole bunch when you were drinking, right? All I'm saying is if you had to call a locksmith, man, that is expensive. There is a lucrative market that this person could have put themselves in. You know what I mean? That outlaw safecracker. They could have made good money. In fact, maybe even better money than cracking safes. I'm just throwing that out there. And the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Is that not us? I'm worried about trying to get my way but I'm stuck in this misery. I'm stuck in complaining in my mind about things that I cannot change. And it says, whatever our protestations. Now, our protestations, our beliefs, our values, our morals are not, whatever we espouse to be our beliefs, is the reality not, are most of us concerned with us, with ourselves, with our resentments, with our self-pity. Yeah, and Rob's got it. The declarations strong or formal expressions of dissent or disagreement. So whatever I'm complaining about, but is it not really rooted in me? Is that not where my focus is and my attention is? And so what we need is to get free of that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more next week. 3 minutes, that's not great time for you, Neil, but thank you so much.